Your software deployment process has different environments it needs to deploy to. Maybe it's dev, test, and production. Maybe you have a QA environment or staging or both. But however many environments you have, you need a way to model them so your tooling understands the structure of your pipeline. Without that structure, you end up with ad hoc deployments, unclear progression rules to build confidence as you move through those environments towards production, and no visibility into what's deployed where. Today I want to explore environments in Octopus Deploy. Environments in Octopus represent the stages of your deployment pipeline. They're how you organize your deployment target infrastructure, whether that's servers, Kubernetes clusters, or cloud services, into logical groups that match how you actually deploy your software. In fact, environments are one of the first things you need to configure in a new Octopus instance, so it's important to understand what they provide. A typical setup is 4 environments: development, test, staging, and production. But Octopus doesn't force you into this predefined structure. Some teams have 3 environments, others have 7, and some have 5. And importantly, you should name your environments to match what your organization actually calls them. If you say, we're deploying to QA, call it QA in Octopus, not test or something else. When you have your environments defined, you create your deployment process once, and Octopus handles promoting it through each environment while applying the right configuration for each environment and adhering to any environment-specific policies and configurations you have. Let's jump in and I'll show you a few things in an existing instance. I want to start by showing you the main dashboard in Octopus Deploy. Going down the page, you can see each project or application I'm deploying using Octopus. But then importantly, across the page, you'll see 3 environments I have defined in my instance: dev, test, and production. At a glance, I can see what version of each application is running in each environment, whether the deployment was successful or not, and if it's a Kubernetes deployment, I can even toggle the live status of the Kubernetes objects related to the deployment, which is something I covered in another video in the series. If I go into environments, I want you to ignore the ephemeral environment at the bottom for now, as that's a special type that I'll cover in another video, but you'll see this is where I have those 3 environments configured. One important thing to understand is that these environments are reusable across all the projects in your space. You don't create separate dedicated environments for each application. You define them once here and then use them everywhere, which keeps your Octopus instance manageable as you scale. If you need flexibility in the environments being deployed to for a specific application, that's where you can use a lifecycle. Adding a new environment is straightforward, where the only thing you need to provide is a name. Let me name this new environment QA and save the config. There's a few options you can set for environments, which we aren't going to explore now, but if I go back to environments, you'll see the QA environment here. In terms of environment progression, QA for my organization comes after test and before production, so I'm going to reorder that here. That does impact the default settings in something we call a lifecycle, which controls the environment progression, but you'll typically create custom lifecycles and define the environment progression in the lifecycle. But one of the reasons I reordered the list is it also orders the environments on the dashboard. So if I go back to the dashboard view now, you'll see the new QA environment appears in the list of environments for my applications. If I go into a project and into a specific release, you can see the environment progression defined here. This release has been deployed successfully to dev and test, and based on my default lifecycle, Octopus knows the next environment to deploy to is QA, so I have an option to deploy that here. But you'll notice I can't yet deploy to production because that will be waiting on a successful deployment to QA first. This is where lifecycles really come into play to control how releases progress through your environments and what the progression rules are. And I'm going to dive into lifecycles in a separate dedicated video in the series. To wrap up, let me show you how environments work with variables, because this is where the magic happens for handling configuration differences. If I navigate into one of my projects and look at variables, I can create a variable and scope it to specific environments. Notice here I have a variable named connection string, and in the value, it's trying to reference another Octopus variable called database.server, but that doesn't exist yet. Let me create a new variable named database.server, and for the value, I'll call this dev-db. And over here, I can then scope this variable to a specific environment, which I'll scope to the dev environment. I can then add another value for the same variable, this time for the test environment, and scope it accordingly to only that environment. Then I can rinse and repeat for other environments I have, like the QA and production environments. So now when this project deploys to the development environment, it'll reference the connection string value, which in turn will use the development environment database.server variable value. Same deployment process, different values automatically applied based on the environment being deployed to. So that's an introduction to environments in Octopus Deploy. They're one of the fundamental building blocks of the platform that lets you model the stages of your deployment pipeline, supporting automating promotions between those stages and handling configuration differences without custom scripts. Combined with features like lifecycles to control promotion rules and variables to manage the environment-specific configuration, environments give you the structure and flexibility that you need for consistent, safe, and predictable deployments. As usual, there's more details and resources linked below. Thanks for watching. I'll see you again soon.